I don't recall anyone ever saying, I had the best night on TikTok last night. I had such a good time scrolling Facebook. I know sometimes you see something funny on there and you share it with your friends and like, it's really good. You know, you find like hilarious stuff and that's great. But how often do people say like, oh yeah, my happiest memories are all from browsing Instagram? Like, it doesn't happen, you know? Those aren't really times. You're not really, for the most part, alive when you're doing that. You're kind of switched off and you're just numbing your brain with something that's just about enough to keep it going, but it's not enough to give you any sort of meaningful experience or to do anything other than to desensitize you to real life, to make other things seem not fast enough, not entertaining enough, not salacious or grabbing or instantaneous, just not enough, basically. To some degree, those things cannot compete with real life, but simultaneously real life cannot compete with those things, and the problem is that those things are faster and easier to access, so they're winning. When everybody has this kind of like form of constant drip feed entertainment in their pockets, they don't need anything else. They don't need to entertain themselves or each other. It's done. They just look at content and pass the night away like that and move on, and all the time that they've lost is forgotten. I think some people are in for pretty rude awakenings when they get older, either when they get older and they realise how dependent they are on these things, or when they're on their deathbed and they look back and they think how they spent their life. I remember a couple of years ago during lockdown, my ex had a pretty bad phone addiction, and we looked at her screen time, and you know, it shows you what you've been using, and to be honest with you, it was horrifying. It was like really sad. For me, it was like, I don't know, it really was upsetting to see, and I think she was quite shocked by it, because you don't notice it, you don't think of it in that way, and then you look and you see you've spent, you know, 13 hours on your phone. This was a time when she didn't have a job. You spent 13 hours on your phone, and what have you got? You've got nothing. You have absolutely nothing. You know, you gained nothing. You haven't gained social skills, you haven't improved your relationship with anyone, you don't have any like fond memories, you haven't achieved anything, you haven't made yourself better off financially, you haven't become healthier, you haven't become a happier person, you've gained exactly nothing. That is, you know, to spend 13 hours and to not only gain nothing, but probably to lose some of your capacity to focus on things and to pay attention to things. It's really sad. I have it a lot myself, like where it's for example, it's time for me to like I have a couple of things to do before bed, and you know, it'll be a task that takes 3 or 4 minutes. Like for example, I usually listen to YouTube videos on my phone while I'm doing the dishes or whatever, or making food. And sometimes I'll have a really short task to do before bed, and I delay it about 10 minutes. You know, this 2 or 3 minute task, I delay it about 10 minutes because I can't find a video that I want to put on while I'm doing it, because I'm so used to having content like piped into my ears 24/7 that I'm just like, no, I've got to find something to listen to while I like scrub this pan, and it's fucking ridiculous, you know. So often, I mean, look, if you If you don't do that and you just sit in your own thoughts, much of the time, maybe even most of the time, it's boring and not much happens. But that's not the point, because sometimes really, really valuable things happen. You do really valuable thinking, and sometimes you can really enjoy your own thoughts. Just thinking can be so enjoyable when you get on the right sort of track mentally, when you're in a good place. But it's hard to ever be in that place if you don't ever allow the possibility for it to happen. So a lot of people will sort of put their phones down and think, okay, I've done it now and this is shit and I'm bored and this isn't doing anything for me. But again, that's not the point, you know. It doesn't always happen. Being inside your own mind isn't always good, but when it is good, it's really fucking good, and it's really valuable, and it's important. And people, I think, are kind of, I think collectively we're quite arrogant and foolish to write off how we became, because, like, you know, if you took someone and you never socialized them and you didn't let them have time to think, and you just put them on TikTok all day for their whole life, what do you think that person would be like? You know, like, how would they be? They you know, they would be basically a vegetable. Like, they would have very little in them that we would consider human. It would be akin to being a feral child, but maybe worse, because it's like more unnatural. So I think most people can accept that, like, that wouldn't be a good way to create a person. And yet we're kind of all creating ourselves now, where we're assuming we're the finished article in a sense, and that our development is not important, and we can just feed ourselves complete shit, and that is going to in some way go well for us, or that we don't need to worry about how it goes. I think we do. Most of these things, if you're good at something, you have a skill you're good at, what happens if you take a few weeks off? You know, you start to lose that skill. The more you do it and get back into it, the better you become again. Sometimes being good at something, it's not about how many hours you've put in throughout your whole life, it's about how many hours you've put in recently. So I think things like basic social skills, analytical skills, the kind of skills you develop in your own mind when you think about things, your sort of management of your own psyche, those are skills that can easily be lost and forgotten, but thankfully can also, I think, quite easily be regained. But we're just not really giving ourselves the time to do that. And I think that's really sad. I'm trying to do it myself more, trying to be bored more. I sometimes have experiences where, like, I don't know, I go out to do something that I can't be bothered to do. Like, for example, late at night, I haven't really given the dog a proper walk, so I take her out at night and I just walk around while it's late and it's quiet out. I don't do anything apart from just walk around with her, and it feels so good. And I think, why didn't I want to do this? You know, this is so much better than the sort of numbing, mindless shit I would have done at home. But it's not as easy. It's not as, I don't know, it doesn't have that same pull. It's, I don't know. I think to some degree, like, some people have kind of made their minds up already. They've sort of made their choice about how they want to live, how they want to entertain themselves and occupy their minds. I don't know how it can change. I think there's scope for some kind of cultural revolution that reshapes how we look at these things. I think the way it starts is with children, with kind of collectively accepting what we should have accepted a long time ago, which is that these technologies and applications are not appropriate for children, and children should not have access to them, especially not unsupervised access. I don't understand why kids are allowed smartphones. We accept they shouldn't smoke, they shouldn't drink alcohol, they shouldn't smoke weed. How can we accept that they have these devices? We accept they shouldn't look at porn, but they have devices that anybody can access porn on. Like, even if you put blockers on, the amount of content that's out there that is just relentlessly sexual, like, it's gotten to a point where I'm just numb to that now. It doesn't do anything for me anymore. Like online two-dimensional sexual content, it's just meaningless. It's just everywhere. Everything is so sexual. It's endless. I cannot really believe how badly we failed children in this regard and just allowed them to continue using these devices and social media and stuff. I don't understand it. So I think that's the first step. Unfortunately, I think there's too much money to be lost, and too much difficulty in actually banning these things. I think we will get there eventually. I think we're going to have a generation of kids who are going to grow up so mentally ill that we're just not prepared for it. My worry is that by that time, the adults or the people who should care are themselves so mentally ill that we don't have a sense of perspective about it anymore, and it becomes normal, and we think, oh yeah, we all have anxiety and depression and, you know, completely sort of deranged thoughts and disconnection from our true selves because we're victims, not because of our choices, not because of the way we manage our own psyches and those of people that depend on us. That's my worry. But I think if we can come to the collective realization that, at very least at first, that these things are not good for children, and people always make this comparison, but it's true. I mean, there was a time when it was fine for kids to smoke. You know, my granddad used to smoke like a pack a day when he was like 11. He continued that throughout his entire life, only increasing the amount that he smoked. I think he got to a point where he was like 70 or 80 a day. But yeah, I mean, he used to just go out on his bike, smoke a pack of cigarettes, and just, that was normal. You know, if you saw that now, you'd be horrified. If you saw an 11-year-old boy smoking, I mean, I have seen that actually, but it's not normal when you see it. And hopefully in the future we'll have the same horror if we see a kid using social media, or hopefully we won't have that same horror because it will be illegal. I don't know why it's not. Again, I really don't know, apart from the fact, I guess, that there's a lot of people making a lot of money from it. That's all I can really, I think it's sort of tangentially related, but I do think our society has completely failed children in recent years. I think it's the biggest failing of our society, of adult society, is we are utterly focused on ourselves, and children have just fallen by the wayside. People don't give a shit about them. People don't talk about them. They don't talk about their well-being. They're shoved into classrooms and boxes with iPads in front of them, and we sort of ignore what's going on with them. We ignore how sick their world is becoming, especially how sick it became during the pandemic. We're putting our fingers in our ears, and if we ever address the consequences or the potential consequences of how we treat them and our actions, it's in a politicized left-right kind of binary way. So there's no nuance, there's no genuine compassion in those discussions, and that's really sad. Isn't even the right word. It's terrible. Yeah, I think that's the first step. And I guess, like so many of these things in ourselves, it comes down to personal discipline. And if, I guess, you know, it's sad, it's like with alcohol and things like that and smoking, you think, well, all right, if people are going to do it, they're going to do it. I don't think we need rules and regulations in place to protect grown-ups from these things. I think it's a cultural shift that we have to make. I don't think the government needs to protect us from our own tendencies and habits and addictions. It's a shame that so many people will succumb to them. It's a shame that these companies are so predatory in that way. But I think it needs to just be something we just collectively accept as terrible. And all the time over the last few years where we've been talking about all this divisive political shit, this is one topic that we can all relate to, that we can all kind of to some extent, we can all to some extent, there you guys can see, we can all to some extent agree on that or relate to it, and or at least there was potential for us to, you know, get somewhere. But we don't really talk about things like this properly. It's in a very kind of glib and superficial way, and I think yeah, it needs to be more of a topic. But obviously part of the way we discuss things now is through technology and through digital media, and the people who finance that and who curate what we see and do and have ultimate control over it obviously don't want us to talk about this, do they? So, you know, they'd rather us talk about other shit that gets us swarming around, clicking and fighting and commenting, rather than things that are actually good for us. So yeah, I don't know, I'm trying to improve it myself. I'm trying to make positive changes. It's difficult, but entirely possible. I think relative to other people I'm not really bad at all, but still, even myself, like, I could be a lot better in this regard. Yeah, as usual, curious to know people's thoughts, opinions, experiences, and thanks for watching.